Welcome to Classic Car Garage, the classic car restoration how-to television show. You know, there's nothing like starting your day at Mel's Diner. That's one of my favorite things to do. I guess you could say it's a classic, just like our classic cars here. Well, we decided before we get to the art of buffing to show you another way that you can evaluate a potential project car, insofar as the engine goes, that is, and that, of course, is to do a compression check. So we're here in a yard right now taking a look at a project car that we might be picking up for a future episode, and Jerry is just about to do that compression check. Jerry, how you doing today?
Very good, Jeff. How you doing?
Good. So we're going to check the compression on a potential project car here. What's the first thing that someone might want to do?
Well, they're going to want to take off the air cleaner and take out all the spark plugs.
Okay. Then after that, we get to the compression gauge. Tell us more about that.
Okay. Well, basically, it's just your basic compression gauge. You're going to go ahead and screw in your adapter here, which plugs into the actual gauge part.
Okay. And a gauge like this is a compression tester, by the way, and something like this you can buy in most auto parts stores. They'll range anywhere from about $40 all the way up to $200 for the really good equipment like this.
Right.
And of course, you're always well served to buy the best tools that you can. So now we've got the spark plugs out. We're going to put the adapter on the compression gauge. What's next?
Go ahead and screw it all in.
Okay, let's get started.
Okay.
Okay, Jerry, now that you've got the compression gauge attached to it, anything special that we need to pay attention to before we turn the car over?
Yes, you want to make sure that your choke butterfly is open, that you're a wide open throttle.
Okay, and we have forced ours open by putting this extension in there, and the throttle's wide open as well, too.
Right.
Okay, so I guess it's time to see what sort of shape that our cylinders are in here, or rather our compression is. So I'll jump in and turn it over.
Very good.
Okay, Jerry, are you ready?
Yep, go ahead and crank it over about 6 times.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, Jerry, I would say that from the numbers you were calling out there that we might have a little problem with our engine here, right?
Yes, we do.
We had compression of 59 on one cylinder and all the way up to 90 on some others.
That's right.
And that means what?
That means that our motor is pretty much tired out.
And really the range should be no more than about 10%, right? This should be anywhere between 90 and 120?
Right.
Okay. So being that we only checked one side, is it safe to assume that the other side is probably in the same shape?
Yes, it is.
All right. So what does all this mean?
It means we're going to have to rebuild our motor.
Okay. I thought that's what you were going to say. So there you have it, folks. It's not hard at all to check the compression in a potential project car. We hope you've learned something here today. Now, let's go inside because we're going to teach you the art of buffing. Well, Jerry, thanks for showing us how to check the compression on a potential project car there. I guess I better get Owen Carter on the phone at Coast Motor Supply, right?
Yes, sir.
Looks like we're in for another complete engine rebuild. And by the way, folks, we're going to be showing you an engine rebuild on our Project Mustang in an upcoming episode. But right now, we're going to do a little more cosmetic work on our project car, and that has to do with our stainless trim here. As you can see, this trim is kind of scratched up here. This is original, and we want to polish this out like new because, of course, we don't want to replace it. This stuff's pretty expensive, isn't it, Jerry?
Yes, it is.
All right, so we're going to buff this out. This is our art of buffing segment. First thing you need, Jerry, is a good motor like this, right?
Yes, you want to use a low RPM, high horsepower motor.
Okay, but you don't want it to spin too fast because, of course, you don't want to cut too deep into your stainless.
Right.
So what do you say we put the rouge on the wheel and let's get started.
Very good.
Okay, Jerry has applied the rouge now to the cutting wheel, so I'm going to stand back and we'll show you a little bit of buffing the stainless trim on our project car. Well, Jerry, that looks pretty good. I mean, you really cleaned this thing up quite well. Almost all the scratches are gone.
Yep.
So the next step now is to apply some jeweler's rouge to this wheel, the final polishing wheel, and do the final polish on it.
Right.
Okay, let's go ahead and get that process started. I'll start the wheel for you.
Thank you.
Well, Jerry, that looks absolutely fantastic. That cleaned up quite well, didn't it?
Yes, it did.
And you can save yourself a lot of money on stainless trim if you learn the art of buffing.
It is very expensive to send it out and have it polished.
Absolutely. A few tips and techniques here that people want to consider is number one, and I guess foremost, is to let the wheel do the work, right?
Right. You don't want to push too hard, otherwise the wheel will grab the part that you're working on and take it right away from you.
Right.
It's very dangerous.
Fly out of your hand, and it'll bend that up as well, too.
Yes.
And of course, rule number two, of course, is always safety. Well, we hope you've learned something about the art of buffing. When we come back, we're going to take you out to the Beverly Hills High School Car Show. Then we'll rebuild the carburetor on our project car. Don't go away. There's more Classic Car Garage coming your way next. Well, we're back here in our garage, and Jerry, we're ready to rebuild the carburetor on our project car. And tell me more about this one.
Well, basically, it's your basic Autolite 4100 two-barrel.
Okay, and this was original equipment on those Mustangs, right?
Yes, it was.
Now, could you also get a Holley carburetor on those as well?
Not on that year, except on a V8 with the big block V8s.
Okay, but because it's a small block, this was standard operating equipment.
Yes, it was.
All right, now what's the first thing we're going to do when we tackle a job like this?
Well, you got to start with disassembling it.
Okay, and then we're going to clean it up.
Yes, we are.
Okay, so let's disassemble first. All right, Jerry, you finally let me do something here, right?
Yes.
Even I can do this. All right, now that we've got the top off our carburetor, let's talk about the interior components here that we're going to be working on today.
Okay. Basically, this here is your float assembly.
Okay.
All right, and there's the needle and seat down inside there.
And we're going to replace those, right?
Well, the float we're going to keep. The needle and seat we are going to replace.
Okay.
And these are our squirters here, so that when you first step on the gas pedal, these will shoot gas into the Venturis, which will actually prevent the bogging or the lagging.
Right, okay. So we've got a rebuild kit here, which includes a bunch of gaskets. We've got a diaphragm, it looks like, some other parts, some small parts here, and this is our
needle and seat.
Our needle and seat right here. So next thing, I guess, is just to go ahead and start taking these things out, right?
That's correct.
All right, let's do it.
Okay.
All right, Jerry, well, our carburetor doesn't look too bad here for a quick job.
Nope.
What is the ultimate way that someone would want to clean up something like this, though? The home hobbyist, that is.
Well, if they have a citrus tank cleaner, that would be the ultimate way, or a carburetor parts dip, that's the ultimate way. But if not, what we've done here is we've just used a brush and gum out. Okay, it takes a little bit of time, but it does work. Yes.
And once again, we endorse using the citrus parts washers because, of course, they're environmentally friendly.
Yes.
And, of course, we're very aware of that here in California, as people all over the country should be. Okay, now that we have this clean, obviously, if we had a little more time here in the show, we would clean all of the parts up completely.
Right.
But the next step is to decide what we want to replace. Obviously, we'll replace things that we have gaskets for, but we want to check out the parts that we need to use over again.
Right, you really want to check out the float. You want to shake it, and if you hear any gas in there, you know you need to replace this, because if it has gas, it'll sink, and your car will constantly be overflowing.
Right, so toss that out if you hear gasoline in there.
Right.
Now, what is the little L-shaped measuring stick here for?
This is actually a ruler to measure your float level. It's
Okay.
very, very critical, and you can look in your repair manual. It'll tell you what your float specification should be at.
Okay, all the specs there. Other hard parts that we're using over again?
We're going to go ahead and use our boosters and our pump cover, which is...
It's in here someplace.
There it is.
There it is, okay.
Right here. We'll reuse this. We'll go ahead and clean this up and reuse it.
Okay, and as always, too, your fuel filter, what do you want to do with this?
You want to replace it.
Toss it right out, okay.
Yep.
All right, well, I guess that's it. And I would imagine you just want to put it back together the same way you took it apart.
Right, you just want to make very sure that when you take it apart, pay attention to what you're doing, don't be in a hurry.
Right.
And make sure everything goes back exactly the same way you took it apart.
And a good way to do that, of course, just to take some pictures of it, and it's not a long job, so a Polaroid camera will work for
Yeah, if you
that.
have a Polaroid camera, that'd be perfect.
Okay, let's go to putting this back together again.
Very good.
All right, Jerry, so our carburetor now looks pretty good, but the most important thing is that it functions well, too.
That's right.
And this really is about a 2-hour job for the home hobbyist, right?
Yes.
Simple hand tools is all you need.
And you're going to need some kind of solvent cleaner or carburetor dip, or ultimately a citrus cleaner.
Right, citrus parts washer or some sort of citrus cleaner.
Right.
And once again, safety is very important. You don't want to have anything flammable around any of those cleaners. As always, of course, that's just common sense there.
Right.
Okay, so now that our carburetor works well, it's time to tackle our engine. I think we'll leave that to the pros at Coast Motor Supply.
Very good.
All right, we hope you've enjoyed a little lesson in rebuilding a carburetor. If you rebuild your carburetor, just follow the directions, and as Jerry said, take your time, because patience is a virtue in this case. Welcome back to Classic Car Garage. In the next couple of weeks, our Project Pony is going to be getting its body and paint work, and of course you'll see all that happen right here on our show. Meantime, we're here at a virtual supermarket for engines. I mean, look at all the engines in front of me just ready for new cars to put them in. We're here at Coast Motor Supply in Canoga Park, California, where Owen Carter is going to be rebuilding the engine on our Project Mustang. Now, Owen tells me that he's got a little surprise waiting for us. I'm not one who usually likes surprises, so I'm going to cross my fingers and hope that it's not too bad. Let's go see what Owen's up to. Owen, good to see you again.
Good to see you, Jeff. Glad you could come look at our patient.
Absolutely. Well, it looks like we've got our work cut out for us here, but I understand that you've got a little news for me, and I'm going to keep my fingers crossed. What is it?
We may have a little more work than we planned on.
Okay.
As you know, we take these things apart and check them to make sure they are rebuildable.
Right.
This block is an old block. It's been around a while. It's been machined several times. When we check the bore on this one, it's already at 4.046, which means it's already 46 thousandths over. The next cut would be at 60 if we could clean it, but we have a lot of rust in the cylinders because it's been sitting a long time. Two options at that point: either find another block, or if we want to keep it original to help preserve the value in the car, we have to re-sleeve the block, which means putting new inserts in each sleeve to bring it back to a standard bore. That actually will be helpful too, because these motors tend to run hot. And with more metal in the motor, it will absorb and dissipate the heat better than if we were to try and run it at 60. So I recommend we re-sleeve the block and keep it original.
Okay, sounds like that's what we're going to do. And as you said, finding another block is another option for a car like this. But with this car being now 35 years old, finding a virgin block that hasn't been worked on is really kind of difficult.
They're getting more and more scarce, Jeff.
So it sounds like really sleeving is the option for most people at this point.
Probably the best choice, particularly in this restoration.
Okay, now our block here, of course, is all grimy and dirty. How do you take care of cleaning up a block like this?
Let's take a look. We'll show you.
Well, Owen, this is considerably different than what we started with. This thing cleaned up beautifully. How'd you get it to this state?
Well, we use a newer system. The old system was to dip tank these, which wouldn't get rust off. It would take the oil and grease off. We use a thermal cleaning process where we literally cook the oil and grease out of the metal. That leaves it with a scale like you get in a self-cleaning oven.
Right.
What we do to get the scale off then is shot blast it, and you wind up with a casting that is as fresh and clean as a new casting. When we magnaflux this to check it for cracks, they show up just like a road map if you have any cracks.
And if you do have cracks, how do you take care of that?
If you have cracks on most blocks, they're junk. Most blocks with cracks are not really repairable.
Okay.
There are a few blocks you might attempt to repair, but that's the exception rather than the rule.
And fortunately, ours was in pretty good shape.
Your block was sound. It was a good block. It'll be ideal for sleeving.
Okay, so let's go on to the sleeving process now. I'm anxious to see what that's all about. All right, Owen, this is an intimidating piece of equipment here. Tell us what this does.
Well, this is a boring bar. It also is the same tool we use when we're going to sleeve a block because the process is very similar. In the case of sleeving a block, we actually cut the bore significantly oversized. We do that in several steps, and then we actually press fit a cylinder sleeve down inside the cylinder. It's an interference fit tight enough you actually have to drive it in. The block, once the sleeving was completed, had to be decked so we could assure that we had a level and true and clean surface for the head to mount on. We also machined the crankshaft and all the connecting rods. Each connecting rod was resized so we knew we had the right size and shape.
And he just basically just pounds it right in there, right?
Well, you've got to compress the rings so they're down to the diameter of the cylinder, and then they'll slide in and they'll have the right tension on the cylinder wall. This is where we do all our final checks on the motors before they go out. This engine is being turned over by an electric motor with oil flowing through it. We measure the oil pressure and the flow. That tells us about our internal clearances. Once we've done all that, we check our oil galleys and seals to make sure there's no oil coming past it, everything's staying inside the engine where it needs to be. Then we mount our rockers and push rods and actually speed up the engine and do an actual compression test on the engine. Our operator here is going to do that test right now, so unless you have any questions, I'll speed up the engine and let him do his thing.
All right, let's see what kind of shape this thing is in.
All right, let's do it.
Well, Owen, the motor sounded good, but what do the numbers tell you?
Numbers look good, Jeff. We had 175 pounds compression across the board. Everything checks out. I think we're getting ready to head this baby back to its home.
Okay, I can't wait to fire that 289 up for the first time and for it to purr like a kitten. Owen, thank you very much for running us through what you do here at Coast Motor Supply, and we'll see you with our next motor.
Thanks for letting us help out.
Stay tuned now, because the new product segment is coming up next, right here on Classic Car Garage.